Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardiff Central podcast. My name's Dan, in the host seat this week, joined by all three of us together for the first time in a while. Harley, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Said a bit gutted all the nice weather's started to finally go away, but I am quite happy that I don't feel like I need to be walking around in just me pants.
There's a slight for listeners, early doors. And Carwyn, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm in homage of Andy Murray in a banana to prep myself for the pod. So, sad to see him retiring and all that. So, yeah, but happy to be on the pod. Happy to be back from missing out on Josh Turnbull last week or the week before.
Good stuff. And from Josh Turnbull to our next guest, our summer of special guests, we've got a man who usually lurking behind the camera or in the background of the Zoom calls, but joins us, star of the show this week, Cardiff's head of marketing and communications. Mike, how are you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm probably someone who shouldn't be on camera. Usually, I'd say face for radio, but yeah, thanks very much for having me. Happy to be here.
Good stuff. It'd be interesting to get a bit of insight into your role. We've had loads of questions as well, but we'll start with just your career path. How did you sort of get into the journalism communications sort of side of things?
In terms of getting into it initially, it's probably quite similar to a lot of people out there. You just kind of go to university to get your degree, and then come out and think, what the hell am I going to do now? So I had a year kind of pondering what I was going to do next, and journalism, I don't know where it came from, but it's something that occurred to me that I wanted to have a look at. Ended up going to the Cardiff University postgrads journalism course, which certainly at the time, and I think it still is, one of the top 2 or 3 in the UK. So I was pretty fortunate to get onto that course. Also quite fortunate that the guy that ran it at the time, David English, who I think passed away, unfortunately, a year or so ago, he from Leeds, I believe, but he was a massive Cardiff fan. So I think he always had a bit of a soft spot for me, being a Cardiff fan myself. So yeah, did that. For my sins, I ended up going from university at Cardiff and that postgrads to the Dragons. So I couldn't tell you how long there, but maybe 3 to 6 months at the Dragons as maternity cover, so press officer there. And then went across to Westgate, that some of you might know. So that was a job where I was going to split across being a rugby writer, so covering predominantly Welsh rugby, and then Swansea City were in the Premier League at the time, so covering that for the national newspapers, which was great. And it was a split role, so the other side of the role was as a PR executive, I guess. So at the time, Westgate had the contracts for British Lions, the Celtic League, ERC as it was then, WRU. So it would be kind of assisting their team with events and the upkeep of their websites, producing content for their websites. In terms of ERC, that was a brilliant period. I used to just get sent around Europe every weekend, and I'd be in Milan the one day because Benetton had taken the game there, and I'd be getting the train down to Biarritz and then going somewhere else. So mental travel, and it was travel on a shoestring. But yeah, great experience, and got to see so many amazing games and brilliant kind of venues. So I did 3 years at Westgate, then went across to the Gloucester Citizen, which is now, well, at the time, I can't remember what the company was called, but it was part of the Reach PLC group, which is Wales Online. Did that for, again, about 3 years, covering all things Gloucester and the English national team. And I probably had enough of journalism by that point. It was probably at the time when there weren't podcasts and things like this you could do, which were a bit more fun. It was a lot of what we call clickbait and stuff that players don't particularly enjoy you writing, stuff therefore the journalist doesn't particularly enjoy writing, but you're kind of made to. So more and more of the job was becoming things I didn't enjoy and less of what I did enjoy. So yeah, I was looking to get out at that point, and fortunately Richard Holland dropped into my DMs on Twitter asking if I'd be interested to look at a role. Met Richard for a coffee, he offered me the job, and yeah, I've been at Cardiff since. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
How long have you been at Cardiff now, Mike?
I started in April 2016. So yeah, it works out something like, it might even be my 10th season I'm going into. Certainly my 9th, possibly 10th, because I had the back end of that one. So yeah, I did 2 years at Cardiff as PR and comms only, and then I took over responsibility then for marketing around 2018 sometime.
And more importantly, were you broadcast or news when you were at Cardiff Uni?
I was news.
Still.
I was news, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of changed now, isn't it? I'm not sure how they split up the different sections, but when I went there, it was newspaper, magazine, and broadcast. So I'm trying to think of guys who are on my course that you might know, but there's a few guys at the BBC. So Hugh Morgan was was on the broadcast course.
Producer for Scrum 5 for those that don't know.
Yeah, Nick Hartley was there. So I think Nick's possibly at the B, but was at ITV Sport for a good few years. But yeah, it's a great course, isn't it? Lots of where you see the alumni of people who have come through that path, and the likes of us are pretty low down on the list, aren't we? When you see some of the big dogs.
Well, I speak for yourself, mate.
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit rude, wasn't I?
No, I'm joking.
You mentioned there that obviously you're a Cardiff fan, and originally as well, before getting into all this. Where does that come from? Where does your Cardiff rugby journey start, and what are some of your best early memories?
My entire family. So growing up, my dad's always been a season ticket holder. He's still a season ticket holder to this day. Strangely, but it's quite nice in terms of his commitment to the club. So all employees get 2 free tickets to every game, and my old man refuses to take those, so he still buys his season ticket every year. I reckon he only goes to 3 games a year now because he hates the night games, but he sees it as his charitable donation to his club. So I think that's testament to how great some of our supporters are, and I know there's a lot of people like that. But no, my dad is a Cardiff boy. My grandfather and his brothers-in-laws were all big Cardiff fans. Used to go week in, week out and follow them wherever they played. I always remember my granddad always used to tell us stories about, when Cardiff beat the All Blacks and what went on after that game. And I don't know if it's that particular game, but the story he always used to tell, which stands out, is they took the club, the piano from the clubhouse and carried it onto the centre of the pitch. And one of the historical guys like Steve Coombs might know who it was, but one of the players was quite renowned for getting on the piano, and he was on the piano, and the players and all the crowds basically just stayed on the pitch drinking and singing all night. So he used to regale us with stories like that, and then he'd probably stop. By the time I was around, my granddad didn't watch them. The game had changed, like happens to a lot of people, the game had changed, not what it was in my day. But my dad always went, and yeah, always used to take me and my brother. Earliest memories, John, I asked my dad a couple of weeks ago actually to try and dig out some of his old diaries to tell me what the first game I went to was, because I'm always very envious when you hear people pick out a football game or a rugby game that was the first ever game they went to, and I haven't got a clue. So yeah, it must have been around 94, 95 maybe. But the games that stand out that I can not remember, like go into a game, but actually remember snippets of the game and the occasion, would be stuff like Cardiff v Bath in 96, where I would have been 10. I think it was the season after. There was a cup semi-final at St Helens against Llanelli that we had a minibus, so it was a few of my mates and the dads all went to St Helens, and we beat Llanelli there. I don't know if you remember, Rob Howley scored a try up the left flank, I think it was. And then obviously the final that year, I think it was the same season anyway, they beat Swansea at the National Stadium in the final. The Toulouse final, I can remember being very upset about that. Yeah, they're probably the Cardiff games so as a kid that stand out. And then when I was a bit older then and able to drink, kind of going on away trips with the boys to, Kingsholm and Bristol around the kind of 2009, 10, 11 period, where we were pretty competitive in Europe, and having a few beers with the the boys and going to those games.
Harley, you got a question?
I was going to say, since you talked about being a season ticket holder, we do have to ask the perennial question of North or South Terrace.
Do you know what? We flitted back and forth. So we'd done, I don't know why, it's probably my dad was annoying people. We switched from the south to the north and then back to the south. There was some sort of theory at one point that by going on the north, it's warmer because you're in the sun sometimes. But then I quickly realised the sun's in your eyes. But yeah, he's in the south now. He's actually in the stand these days. And then, yeah, generally I would probably go southeast rather than north. There's too much of the away support in the north, particularly those Scarlet derbies where I wouldn't want to be stuck over there with those.
It's a good politician's answer to say both there. That's what I'd expect from a true club. And
the family stand's fantastic as well.
It's all a great place for you to go stand or sit.
Yeah.
We'll stop them
season
before he
tickets
gets on
are
the
still
court
available.
So onto the role as it is then. What is the day-to-day sort of tasks of the manager of the marketing and communication team? What does that look like for you?
This is a question I hate getting asked this because I can never answer it. I find it a really difficult question to answer, actually. So obviously there's a lot of overlap between comms and marketing anyway, but at the same time, they're quite different. So I'll just start with today, actually. I've met all my regional counterparts today. We had kind of a bit of a morning workshop together, just kind of sharing feedback from the season past and things we want to change in the season ahead, kind of planning and looking at things we can do differently moving forward and just trying to work closer together and more effectively. So just a nice catch up with those guys. We all have a pretty good relationship. So I've been there all morning, came out of there, bumped into Jockey, so I ended up having a bit of an impromptu meeting over coffee with Jockey for an hour or so, and then it was just your general kind of admin for a couple of hours at the end of the day. But it's very different, generally speaking. There's no day that's the same. I guess in the season there is a bit of a structure in terms of you've got a game on your Friday or Saturday, and the boys are off on a Wednesday, and we have certain meetings that take place on certain days. But there's still a huge amount of variety in that. But yeah, in the season, you're looking Mondays, a kind of planning day, I guess, where you're in the final stages of prep for the game on the weekend. So we'll have I'll do a weekly marketing comms meeting with my team, and I say team loosely because it does fluctuate between being a team and being a couple of people. So where it's applicable, we meet as a group, and then we have kind of an all staff meeting on a late Monday morning where we just make sure everything's in place, kind of iron out any issues that need to be tackled ahead of, say we're staging a game the weekend, making sure everything's accounted for, basically. Update on ticket sales, what we need to be doing, etc. And the Tuesdays you tend to do press conference days, so I'll see Carwyn quite frequently at those. Wednesday the boys are off. Thursday we have like our management meeting, so I sit on the exec management team, I guess it's called. Very similar to the Monday meeting, to be honest, but much higher level stuff, which is possibly confidential at the time and a bit more strategic. And then Friday, I'm usually traveling with the team. And then in terms of things I'm responsible for, it's essentially everything you see in relation to the team. So in terms of communications, you're looking at everything: website, social media, match day programs, whether it's external stuff with Scrum 5, Wales Online, Sky Sports, TNT, whoever it may be. I'll be kind of managing that. In line with that, I'll be briefing the players and the coaches on what to say, what not to say. Obviously, there's a big kind of perception certainly in rugby that the players are media trained massively. They're not. It's I'm much happier for them to bring across their own personality and their own opinions. But obviously, there are times when we want them to steer away from certain topics. So it's just kind of high level stuff like, this question's coming on the 60 cap rule, 30 cap rule as it is now, and just try and avoid it as best you can. So that's probably the crux of it on the comms side. And then in terms of the marketing side, is how we promote and sell pretty much every product we have on offer, from your retail stuff that Macron predominantly look after to match tickets, season tickets. So all the social media posts pushing that, all the email campaigns, segmentation of those campaigns to different audiences and demographics are getting different content from us, etc. Paid media, social media adverts, everything, to be honest. I've probably missed a load of stuff there, but yeah, it's quite a wide-ranging role.
Explains when Mike doesn't always answer my phone calls then.
WhatsApp me.
No, but like you say, when you go to those press conferences, quite often there might be one or two topics that are kind of come up. I remember interviewing Rhys Carey end of last season, and you knew a couple of, you've obviously given him a quick brief, but it's not sort of avoid those topics. It's, look, I'm giving you a heads up. This is what's going to come up. Just find a way that you're happy and we're happy to have those to answer that question, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think Rhys was actually quite an easy one for us, because the reason he left was nothing to do with Cardiff. Ultimately, like he loves the club, and he loved his time at the club, and he's still in touch and good mates with loads of the boys. He said what he said, but I was quite comfortable there that he was very positive about us, Jockey, the environment being built, and the culture at the club. And he's a good talker, Rhys, in fairness to him. He seems like quite a dour character at times, but he's actually pretty good in the media. And yeah, he had a great season, didn't he? So it was only fair that he had the opportunity to do some interviews at the end to kind of thank supporters and put across his side and his reasoning for leaving. And what was he? He's our top try scorer of the year. So in terms of on the pitch as well, he was tearing up trees, and he deserves that kind of exposure and opportunity to say thank you.
Yeah, it didn't help when I meant to say you've had a market improvement in a certain area, and I said you've had a remarkable improvement, rather different meaning. But in fairness, he played it off quite well and laughed it off. But I did feel terrible at the time. I remember just sleeping in my chair and wanted the ground to swallow me up.
I've had a few of those this year, don't worry.
Now, how much, and like obviously been there 8 years now, a couple of seasons, how much has the landscape changed in terms of like operating within Welsh Rugby, but also sort of your job specifically, different trends, different, focuses, social media wise, general media wise?
Yeah, it's probably two parts to that question. So in terms of the landscape of rugby, or Welsh rugby specifically, as we all know, there's been huge challenges, and therefore huge uncertainty at times. It makes it very difficult for the club to invest in resource, etc. So there's been times where people have naturally left, and the one thing I will say is pretty much, I'd say everyone actually who's left since I've been there from my department, they've gone on to really good roles. So we've got, one's just finished. We've had two that have gone to UEFA. We've had one that went to eBay. They've gone to really, bigger and better things, I guess, which I think shows they're doing a good job for Cardiff, and they're good at their roles, and we do bring in good people. But naturally, because there's been such uncertainty where some of those guys have left, we haven't been able to replace them. So we've gone, there was a point last year when we had two people in the department. So enormously challenging when the remit gets bigger and bigger every year. And then just in terms of how the industry's changed, yeah, that's changed exponentially, really. Thinking back now, when I first started, I wasn't responsible for marketing at the time, so I certainly wouldn't take credit for any of this, but I'm pretty sure in saying we didn't do any sort of email marketing. I think the kind of social media, like paid stuff, was in its infancy, if at all. and it was very traditional. It was poster sites, it was bus backs, nothing tangible, nothing data led. Whereas I'd say probably 80% of what we do now is around data and digital advertising in one way or another, or emails, whatever. And then on the comms side, yeah, just social media just constantly changing, isn't it? There's TikTok is blowing up at the moment, and then I'm sure there'll be another platform, another Threads or something turning up that we actually do need to use. But it's just more and more platforms to service in different ways as well. You need to think about different content for different platforms, and when your resources stretch, that is very difficult to do. I don't know if that answers the question properly.
Yeah, I mean,
have you got anything else to follow up with there?
No, I think it's a really interesting insight, and obviously specifically in Welsh rugby over the last sort of 2 years or so, it's been since COVID really, it's been a bit up and down. You mentioned there you've had like hardly anyone in the team. What has it been like being on the inside of it in terms of like the uncertainty? Lots of the stuff just come out through the WRU via media or via sort of leaks to certain outlets. What's it like living with that uncertainty? People lots to talk about job losses and that sort of thing.
It's quite a difficult question. I don't want to go too much into. It's probably not my place to say stuff on the politics of Welsh rugby. The uncertainty is worrying at times. I think we're probably one of the fortunate teams at Cardiff that by geography we're in a pretty strong position. But it's more the frustrations you sometimes get where the club are in a difficult situation, the WI are in a difficult situation. As we all know, there's limited money in rugby at the moment on a global level even, and there are things you want to do and there are improvements you want to make that you simply can't. So it does feel like sometimes you're kind of trying to fight with one arm tied behind your back, which I guess that's the biggest frustration for me at times. But I would say we've got a fantastic team at the club. We got a very wide range of different people from different backgrounds, but everyone's really passionate about their role and their job. I think it is true to say everyone does go the extra mile and puts in a real shift. And it's a great place to work, particularly on the rugby side with Jockey and the culture built there. They're fantastic to deal with and work with, and it was quite good last year because, as you know, we had that kind of clear narrative around fight, and that's true from the players on the pitch to everyone in the office. Everyone was digging in and doing their very best for the club at a time where things were challenging.
You mentioned that working with everyone, and obviously he's no longer there, but I remember interviewing Rhys Blumberg end of last season, and he was talking about the messaging that was the plan. There was a plan around the messaging last season, around sort of I was going to say hyping up, but that's the wrong phrase. But giving a heightened presence to the young players coming through, your Mackenzie Martins, your Alex Manns. That was a discussion, I assume, between all of you and how you could approach that and sort of highlight them and their qualities and what they were going to bring and their backgrounds. For instance, Mackenzie from Ely, etc.
Yeah, I had a bit of a bone to pick with Rhys as well, because in that interview, I don't think he meant it as he said it, but it sounded like he was taking a bit of credit for that initially. Where it's
no, he didn't. He didn't.
It's Matt Sherratt that deserves the credit for that. In fairness, what I love about Jockey, he loves sports history and identity and the culture. So I guess he's quite fortunate now. We've kind of been true to ourselves, and we've gone from being Cardiff Blues to Cardiff, and we can tap into all that incredible history and kind of unashamedly do so. So we do have the benefit of being able to do that, which previous regimes haven't. But Jockey loves all that stuff. So he loves talking about that history, that identity of the club. And then the values he set was fight and enjoyment. So it was the boys fighting for everything given the situation we were in, and he was tapping into things like Jack Matthews when he was talking about that fight, and obviously the famous stories of Dr. Jack fighting Rocky Marciano. The enjoyment he'd be tapping into, whatever it might be, Gareth Edwards, Mark Ring. We've always had an identity of playing good kind of rugby. And then in terms of young players, well, the situation we were in was we had to use a lot of these young lads who, yes, they had huge potential, but they were untested at that particular level at the time. And it was basically all about giving predominantly young local lads an opportunity, them giving their all for the blue and black jersey and giving it a go to try and play some good rugby. And Jockey came up with all that himself. He's quite clear in that identity and those messages he wanted, spoke to me about it. And, you know, I instantly agreed and bought into it. And it was something we tried to put across in our comms and our marketing as much as possible. And it was really cool, actually, because throughout the season then we would see guys like yourselves and other people on Twitter who are quite vocal kind of repeating those messages. And even journalists, you know, whether it's the guys at Wales Online or whatever, they were repeating those messages. And it was really, really cool to see, actually. And probably the first time I've seen at firsthand the power of that, because, you know, it was a season where we were losing a lot and we weren't getting the results, yet the narrative around us was so positive. I think you look at other clubs who were in a similar position and they were getting a hammer in from left, right, centre, whereas because I think Jockey had a clear identity and vision and something that was true and people could see it was true and genuine, people bought into that and can see that kind of long-term project.
Yeah. You mentioned there about obviously the tapping into the history of the club. That was a massive change that occurred while you were at the club. Is that something which you sort of has come from yourself, has driven from your sort of Cardiff links, or is that something that you that came from management but you agreed with and ran with it?
Yeah, I can't take credit for that at all. It was something I certainly championed the whole time, being someone who's always supported the club. We used to debate it quite frequently, and I'd always want to like push things a bit more because, well, if you even take aside my personal kind of support of the club, even if I came from, you know, the other side of the country, you come to Cardiff and you see that history and the names associated with us, and you know, even you look at who the most famous players in the world all time. Well, two of them play well. I'm sure some of the guys who go further back into the 50s and beyond would mention some others. But if you look kind of 70s onwards, two of the biggest names ever to play rugby, Jonah Lomu, Gareth Edwards, both played for Cardiff. Now, why on earth aren't we using that? You look at Premier League football, you look at NFL, whatever it might be, big global sports, they massively tap into their team's identity. Usually they're around a geographical area rather than just being some random name. And it's all about heritage and their history. So I always wanted to use that, and it was frustrating that we weren't able to. I think the catalyst for doing it was Alan Jones. I'm not sure where exactly it came or how the decision was made, but it was certainly something that Alan was passionate about and felt was the best route forward for the club. So, I mean, you'll have to look back at the time, but I'm pretty sure it was around the time that Alan came in as chair. Quite quickly, we then ditched the Blues name and kind of we became true to us. I always use the phrase we were true to ourselves. We all knew we were Cardiff. It is a massive club, isn't it? And the other side of my family from Aberdeen, and I always remember going up to Aberdeen. It might have been the Die Young thing, but you'd see Cardiff shirts around Aberdeen. There's no reason why the wider area and the wider region that we kind of represent and offer a pathway to can't support Cardiff. You know, there was a mad stat I heard years ago, but the percentage of Cardiff City fans that are from the valleys. So there's no reason. So it's just like, we've got this massive brand and this massive history. Well, let's start using it. And I think Alan was probably the catalyst to actually going ahead and doing that.
Obviously, one of the sort of the big support organisations, CF10, they're you know, a big part of what they remit and what they campaign for is all the history stuff. Have you thought about doing even more with them about you know, introducing the history aspects of the media, getting them to you know, talking with the likes of Steve about important dates in Cardiff history to bring out and lean on that heritage more?
Yeah, we try to be honest. It's just time and resource, to be honest. So Steve's brilliant, really knowledgeable guy, and does some fantastic stuff. And he contributes a piece to our program every week, every home game. And when we've done kind of campaigns, it was probably something we did more during COVID, where we weren't so busy and we were scrambling around to find content. Steve was really helpful in that and really helped drive that content. Where we did an Ultimate 15, from all time and things like that, and he was a real driving force behind that for me. So yeah, the guys in the Heritage Committee are fantastic. The guys at CF10 are a massive support, really helpful, and the guys that's I always call them the Cardiff Blues CBSC, the normal supporters club. Obviously, they have a different kind of focus and area, so they don't obviously get involved in kind of the history and that kind of thing. But no, we have a really good relationship with all the supporter groups and try to work with them as much as possible. Where we can definitely improve in those areas, but it's just kind of having the boots on the ground, so to speak, to be able to do that and give them the time and energy they deserve, which it's sometimes not possible.
As I mentioned at the top of the pod, we had quite a few people sending in questions. I think the first one from Reese is one that was quite a popular one. I think quite a lot of people will be interested in about, well, it's probably the bane of your life as well, about people nagging you for sign-ins and news and stuff on social media. But the question was, who decides when sign-ins/re-signings get announced, and how hard is it to keep those a secret beforehand?
It's Stephen Thomas, isn't it? So, do you know what? It's really difficult. We, in an ideal world, we've done it in the past, and we'd still like to, but it's probably not possible right now. If you go back before the chaos in Welsh rugby, you'd be doing business in October, November. You'd have your recruitment wrapped up by January. It would stay under wraps, and you start dripping some nice big signing stories out in the build up to launching season memberships or a big match, trying to enthuse people when you want supporters to make that decision to give it another year and another year of hope. So yeah, that's the way you'd want to do it. Obviously things have got a lot later now, so there's that part as well. But I think just agents talk a lot. Even if it's not the agent that represents that particular player, you might be pushing another player and then you're told, oh no, we're not interested in this fly half or whatever. We've just signed so-and-so, and then that agent might mention it to someone like Carwyn by here, and Carwyn's got a nice scoop. And then I'll get calls. More often than not, the journalists are great. They'll always give me a heads up that they're doing it. And look, if it's true, I'm not going to lie to them. I've got a relationship to maintain with journalists, and if we can have any trust, then the moment I lie to them and tell them, oh, no, it's not true, we haven't signed Callum Sheedy, for instance, and then we announce it a week later, well, they're going to hate me and they're not going to come to me again. So we'll give them a steer. If they're right or wrong, we'll ask them to work with us on it. And usually at the moment, it'll be trailed in the press somewhere before we announce it, and it's usually because it's just been kind of verbally agreed, the paperwork isn't done, it hasn't gone through clearing house of the WRU, or a visa needs to be done, or a medical, or whatever it might be. So while it's close, it hasn't been officially done, and we're not in a position to be able to announce. It's frustrating when you've got something up your sleeve and you want to have a nice big fancy announcement, and someone published it in Wales Online. But they're only doing their jobs, so there's no hard feelings there.
I'm just grinning. I don't know what to say.
But I've been there. You're doing your job. That's what you do.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I know probably slightly different circumstances, but last season, for instance, Ellis Jenkins came on the pod with and him and Geraint go back away and know each other, and mentioned, look, I'm retiring. So we decided to do a 10-minute segment talking to him just about that, because it was going to be big news. and then it's me calling you up going, "Hey mate, when's the
Okay,
news
process.
dropping?" Which I did enjoy. You're very like, I don't know if you were not sure what I was on about or were just playing by saying something like, "What news? What news to do with that?" But
Trying to buy myself a little bit of time.
but that is part of it, isn't it? And you know, we'd agreed with Alice beforehand that we weren't going to release before the news came out with Cardiff, and that's how it works, isn't it? A lot of the time, it is these conversations and embargoes that go on, which hold information for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, I think the main thing for me is if you want to keep a good relationship and keep that trust, then you can't be dishonest with people. I might try and stall a little bit and buy us a bit of time, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie to people. And equally, if you're putting out, we're signing Anton Dupont as people have been. Yeah, if you're a reputable journalist, I will be telling you that isn't true, and not to publish it because you're gonna end up with mud on your face. Sorry to disappoint you all.
It's funny though, because one of my favorite parts of the last game of the season, I think, Simon Thomas is like asking Jockey, "So you're signing this, you're signing that, you're signing this, you're signing that," and goes through every single position that has since been signed. I suppose now it's a case of people can see the gaps in squads and things a bit easier as well. So they're searching for those stories a bit more perhaps, or it's easier to find those stories as well.
Yeah, it is, and it's no secret we've lost a huge amount of players over the last 2 years, and big name players and big characters in the squad. And you just look 1 to 15 players who have been here in the last 2-3 years who aren't here. So yeah, it's just easy to come up with, isn't it? And they're well-known players, so everyone's very much aware that Rhys Carré is off or Thomas is off, and asking who's the next one to come in.
Another question we had in was from Andrew Ford. He asks, are there any other marketing teams that Cardiff take inspiration from with comms on social media?
Yeah, there are. Just thinking who'd be the obvious ones to talk about. I touched on it earlier. Premier League football, I probably look at quite a bit. I'm not really sure why, but I'm an Arsenal fan, which has been great in the last couple of years because they're actually doing really well. But I absolutely love what they put out. I think, I don't know if it's the Arsenal team or the Adidas team, but some of the content they put out around kit launches and signings and things is just unbelievable. But generally, I will look at a lot of the Premier League clubs. I don't know if any of you are aware of them, but there's a team called #FC. I couldn't even tell you what tier of English football they're in. It's non-league, semi-pro, but their digital audience is phenomenal. So they, for those of you who don't know, look them up. They were started by a YouTuber. Reese Blumberg and I met, I can't remember his actual, but he's like head of marketing or head of social media from them some point last season. So that was a link that our chairman Alan had and introduced us. We had a great meeting with them, and just seeing what they do is just really interesting. Obviously, they're semi-pro, and a lot of their players are, it's a bizarre concept to a lot of us oldies, but they're influencers and YouTubers and have actual careers out there. So they're natural guys who will gravitate to doing some of that content, which professional players won't, but it's some real nice ideas you could tap into and pick up there. I love looking at, I don't particularly watch the sports, but I love watching the American sport documentaries, your All or Nothings and those kind of things. And the way, particularly the NBA and NFL teams market themselves, I think is incredible. And, there's huge amounts we can learn from them. And then on a closer level to us, stuff like AFL, they do some really cool stuff as well. So yeah, it's just kind of keeping your eyes on social media and looking at different sports and just trying to pick out little bits and pieces, because I mentioned Premier League, NBA, NFL. Well, probably just one of their teams is worth the entirety of what the value of rugby is. So we can't do what Arsenal do or what the Patriots do, but they're certainly always little ideas or takeaways we can then implement to what we do and try and rip off There's no such thing as a original idea, is there? So yeah, we'll quite often pick up little ideas here and there and try and do our own little twist on them. And yeah, seems to be working at times.
When it comes to picking, when you're marketing games and you're pushing to get these, getting these record, this, one of the best seasons we've had for attendance in quite a while. Do you find some games naturally tend themselves to be a bit more easy? Like Derby's obviously quite hot. And the whole push of the Anglo Welsh, that seems to be a really big sell. But do you tend to put more effort into certain games, or do you try and get, there's some like fixtures where you're like, well, we're probably not going to get too many for that, so we won't push as hard, or
Definitely. We know our derbies are always going to sell very well. I think this year might be a little bit more challenging because we have 2 home derbies earlier in the year where we don't traditionally sell them out. But ultimately, we've got to do everything we can to try and sell them out because they're the games that have the potential to do so. If you're fortunate in Europe and you get a nice draw, then you're onto an absolute winner. So we were really lucky last year that we had Harlequins and Bath at home. So it is. People talk about us selling out 4 games last year. It was only 3 we sold out. Bath was pretty close. Sold out Quins, sold out Dragons on Boxing Day, which touchwood is always going to sell out. And then we say sold out. Technically, a lot of the tickets were comps or heavily discounted Connaught. So that's our club's day. We always identify a game. We were lucky this year. So it's something URC have also brought in. We were quite lucky that the game we kind of earmarked, which would work for us for club's day, landed upon one of their, what do they call them, Origins rounds. So it all kind of came together. But we'll pick a fixture that doesn't traditionally generate a massive crowd at a time of year where usually you'll notice this in the Six Nations or something where it's not too late a game if we can help it. And wherever there's those kind of fixtures, you're looking at a way where we can generate extra interest or new audiences to come. So you'll see we've put a lot of effort in recent years to students. It's a bit of a transient market, isn't it? Because people are only in Cardiff for 3 years or 4 years, whatever. But the facts of it, we've got 3 huge universities in the city, and there's an audience there. So let's do what we can to get them in. So we've had our most successful kind of student activations in recent years. To us, it's nothing to shout about, but we've had 500-600 students to our last one, which is, I think, only scratching the surface, but it's much more than we've had in the past. So it's a good start and something we can build on. Clubs Day obviously sold out last year. We'll do things where we target your blue light services, teachers, council workers, and just try and do targeted offers to certain demographics on certain fixtures. But you're entirely right. So your bigger games, you need to do less to sell, but you probably need to work hard to make sure you maximize every little bit of it, because they're the games that kind of, in terms of your revenue, they turn the dial. They're the ones that make the big money for us, rather than the others, if any of that makes sense.
It's interesting with the student one, just from a personal, professional point of view, working in the higher education sector. There's obviously not a lot of money around generally at the moment, but we do a bit of we do our Welsh varsity every year, and trying to shift those tickets is tough for something which the students do feel a bit more of a connection to than with the university itself, rather than the city they live in potentially. But yeah, it's that must be something that is quite challenging at the moment. Sort of the world economic view, getting people to part with their money is probably one of the hardest things to do at this moment.
Yeah. So just on the student one, so I don't know the data off the top of my head of what we made from it, but the ticket was basically £10 a ticket, and you had a free pint. So really good price point for students, and we did pretty well with it. But the black bar behind the north stand, I don't know why we call it, but I think it was an old Guinness bar. It's all black still, so it's known as the black bar. That did way more than it usually does. So you're talking tens of thousands more than what it might usually do on a game day. It did that particular game because we know students are going there. So yeah, that worked really well. And just in terms of your second point around, I guess, the cost of living crisis is something we talk about quite frequently. We try to keep our tickets and our memberships as affordable as possible, but we've also got to appreciate our costs are going up all the time. So it's something where I get into debates with colleagues in our management meetings and whatnot, where they're looking at a commercial or their cost levels and saying, you know, our energy bills have gone up, our cost of beer has gone up, our staffing costs have gone up. And I'm coming at the angle, well, that's also the same for all our supporters, and we also need to make sure it's affordable to supporters. So we usually bump heads for a couple of minutes and then come to kind of an agreement somewhere in the middle where there is an increase, but probably one that is in line or just below kind of what inflation might be. So I think this year we've across the board tickets have gone up by maybe £5-10 on a membership, and be reflected in a similar way for match tickets. All the Welsh clubs are pretty similar. We're probably our top end ticket is probably towards the higher end, and our lowest tickets probably towards the higher end. But we're in the capital city. We have scarcity, which certainly, this don't take this as a pop. It's the reality of their stadium. The Ospreys don't have scarcity because they're in a massive stadium, so they have a lot more flexibility to offer cheap tickets in a corner of the ground or behind the sticks, whatever. And yeah, then you compare us to English clubs, and it blows my mind what they're charging. I'm thinking, oh God, I'd love to do that because it made my life a lot easier. But yeah, we seem to be in line. We did a bit of we finalised our pricing for the season to come end of last week. So I did a little bit of market research around that, and we're loosely in line with all the clubs in Wales and Scotland, some of the English clubs, but certainly the English clubs in wealthier areas, we offer far, far superior value.
Yeah, I was going to say, with the English clubs being basically mainly living in Exeter at the moment and seeing, hearing how much some of the people at my local pub pay for their season tickets, and you're like, Cardiff's season tickets basically the same price as when I last had one before I moved down here.
But people pay it, don't they? So it's what the market kind of dictates. If people are happy to pay that and they're selling out their games, which to their credit, teams like Bath and Exeter do quite frequently, then good on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually finally after 5 years there, I finally went to my first game in Sandy Park, and I can see why people go week in, week out. It's actually quite a nice place. Quite a nice place. And the 2 pointers with a handle is a good seller for a beer drink like myself.
I guess depends how quickly you're drinking. It gets too warm for me, a 2 pointer. You're chugging.
But I think the problem there is I drink a 2 pointer the same rate I can drink a pint. So just want to sort of go on to sort of the match day program. So one of the questions we got from a couple of people back actually when we had David Allen on the pod talking about it was about the transition to online. So I was just wondering how, with your from your end, how you think the switch to online programs has gone in terms of interactions with fans. Has it been generally a positive feedback, or
the numbers are positive, but I am aware that you do get negative feedback from. I'm not being dismissive of this now, but from a small minority, you do get negative feedback, and I completely understand that. But if you look across any print, or Carwyn will know better than most, you look at journalism, the print industry is getting smaller. I don't want to say it's dying, but it's getting smaller and smaller. And
be careful now.
You're finding ways to diversify in journalism, and you look at Carwyn, you got Sporting, which is I guess you'd call it a higher end sporting magazine, where a big part of that model is based around the advertising.
Yeah.
And as big a part of the magazine is the podcast. And that's how it drives revenue. You look at the newspaper industry, and it's really struggling. You look at our media landscape in Wales. It's always funny. We have the meetings in URC, and the Scottish guys and the Irish guys talking about all the journalists from different papers that attend their games. And we're like, well, there's only 2 newspaper groups in. Well, there's probably some smaller ones, but in terms of the big ones, you basically got the South Wales Argus and then Wales Online. So for ourselves, there's only one newspaper group that covers our games. So the print industry is struggling, and basically for us the decision was simple. We would get the industry standard. You tend to get about 10% of your attendance were buying a program. We were substantially below that. I think that's very good if you're getting that. So we are probably doing a couple of hundred programs a game. And for the time, effort and cost that went on to it, just wasn't feasible. When we launched the digital programs, we went up to about 2,000-3,000 unique downloads a game. We're still around the 1,000 mark to 2,000 on a particularly big game. We probably don't consistently promote it enough. We do see, if we're under the pump and we haven't, pushed it out on the channels and therefore pushed it out on email, that will be reflected in the numbers. So we probably need to be a bit more consistent in getting it out there to people. But it's far more accessible to people now, takes far less time, costs less money, and more people are looking at it. So kind of the data speaks for itself there, but I do appreciate that you're not getting something physical in your hand to take away, which I know people like as a memento. We've discussed in the past, like doing a magazine and things, but the numbers haven't really added up to do so. And I mean, I don't know about any of you boys, when was the last time you bought a newspaper or anything like that? Everything's on my phone now. Even my parents, they're the same. Everything's on their phone. So I think there is probably a little bit more pain with more pain to come with, a small minority of people still really wanting those programs and that kind of souvenir aspect. But I think unless you're in a big game, like a nice European knockout or something where it's an occasion, I don't think it really makes sense to do a printed one.
Yeah, it's just the reality of the situation. I didn't realize, to be fair, those numbers you say about going up as drastically as they had online, that says it all, really, isn't it? If you've had any reticence of doing it, you see a spike to 2,000 from whatever the number was before, you immediately think, well,
and and you can make them up to date. So what we do when we're printing programs, you're usually sending it to print. I mean, I was always late sending it, but you're talking probably late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, you'd be sending to print, and you'd be guessing the team, or if you're the opposition and your counterpart or another club is asking you for the team, well, you're not giving them the team. You're making up a random team, and you're putting a few curveballs in there to hope they're taking it to their coach. You can't trust that they're not, so you're not going to give them your actual team. So the teams are always not complete nonsense when they're printed, and the first thing anyone looks for is the teams when they open the program. And with the digital one, they're spot on, and we can change at any point. I can change what's in the program. So we've had a few times, it's usually been commercial things that a commercial advert's slip the net, and there's a sponsor that's flagged their program, their advert isn't in the program, and when the commercial teams have come running over, say, bugger, this hasn't gone in, what can we do? And I'm like, oh, don't worry, a couple of clicks of the button, I've got the advert back in. So those changes are instantaneous, and everything's kind of live and current and up to date, which is a big difference. And it's a pretty good platform. They're continually improving it. So I think that's the way we go for now. And I don't know whether you'd even have digital programs in a few years' time. I'm not sure if programs would even exist, to be honest. I know some clubs don't do anything at all. Certainly you go to France, I think you get a sheet of paper if you're lucky. You go to Italy, they don't tend to do them. South Africa don't do them. So it's a funny one.
As someone who spent a considerable amount of this off-season sorting through old programs of rugby and football, and then only keeping a select few, there must be a couple of £100 that I'm throwing away there. Well, also, if anyone wants any old rugby or football programs, hit me up because I've got hundreds. But
Fire hazard.
Yeah, pretty much. One other question we had in, which relates a bit back to when we had Dickie on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about plans to really drive out of rugby revenue as much as possible, and with the Arms Park redevelopment coming up. Jonathan asks about what is there that can be done to advertise sort of the clubhouse and the offering of the Arms Park to a non-rugby audience on a non-match day? Is that obviously your primary focus is the rugby stuff, but as marketing, is that something you think about as well, the non-rugby aspect of it?
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't keeping an eye on the questions that are coming into your tweet today. So I knew that one was coming, and yeah, it's a good question. We probably don't do enough there. You remember we did have signage on, I never know if you call it the front or back, the Principality facing side of the clubhouse, talking about bar open and whatnot, and that disappeared at some point over the last couple of years. It's never been replaced. We've spoke about putting something up there, maybe a digital screen which advertises something, but I think I don't know how much merit there is in just kind of trying to get casual people who fancy a pint just to wander down and have a pint in the clubhouse. I don't think that's really going to be effective in terms of you've got to have your staff there then all day, and if someone's coming in for a couple of pints or 2-3 people out, you're probably losing money on your cost of keeping it open. But I say that the clubhouse is open most days because we use it as a meeting space. So whenever any of us have external meetings, we host them in the clubhouse, and there's always someone behind the bar for coffees and whatnot. And it's probably an area that has fluctuated with the resource within the company. So we have recently brought in I can't remember a title exactly, but an events person. So Sarah's come into the team. So her area of focus is basically selling as much as she can in terms of event space in conferences, whatever it might be. So while I'm saying, you might not stay open or try and get just casual people to wander down, where we are really focusing is getting companies in for their workshops or team building stuff. So, just in the last week, I think we had Guinness in. They had 20-30 people all day doing a conference in the Pack Bar. We've had companies doing family fun days on weekends where generates really good revenue actually for the company and also the community foundation, because they'll be bringing all their inflatables, etc., for the families. What else do we do? All our box holders can come in and use their boxes when they book them. We have lots of parties. I'm sure you've seen that the Pack Bar's been given I would say had a massive overhaul, but it's certainly been smartened up and given a nice lick of paint and better facilities in there now. So that's a really nice space for private hires. We're getting a lot of kind of 18th, 21st birthday parties there. One area I do think we need to think about more and try and tap into more is the concerts. So how do we maximize on a Taylor Swift coming to the Principality? And I'm not sure what the answer is there, because speaking to people in that industry, I don't think anyone did particularly well that night, because when you actually think about it logically, well, those going to see Taylor Swift predominantly are families, younger people who aren't necessarily drinking. I went the following week to Foo Fighters, and it wasn't a huge amount, but there was probably 30 of us in the clubhouse drinking. So I had a group of mates and lots of other people. Who's a load of Ospreys. He was the chair of the Osprey Supporters Club, and his mates were there putting money in our till, which was nice. But how do we get people in on those events? Or if it is a Taylor Swift, all right, we're thinking, how can we get people into our bar? Is there something different we can actually be thinking about to do there? And I think Richard probably did mention it on the podcast, and it's something we talk about. It's like where we are, it makes sense to have us as a fan zone for any event next door, but it's all sorts of stuff to kind of agree and put in place before you can do that. But yeah, we're very, very lucky with our location, and we work very hard to maximize that. But yeah, there's always more that we could do.
I had a question from Rich on Twitter as well. Says, well, I think you may have seen this one as well. If Cardiff doubled their marketing budget for next season, where would you want to spend it?
Yeah,
All or nothing documentary. Aaron.
That would be lovely, wouldn't it? Yeah, Ryan Reynolds mob involved. I split it in 3, and I would spend a third on resource and kit, so getting us some better quality equipment and more people on the ground. I do a third on kind of your data and having, so we work with a company called Two Circles, but having a wider ranging kind of deal with them where they can really dig in, expand our data, dig into it, and kind of segment data so we can do all sorts in that field and link everything up across, your tills, your website. So it's all kind of one system, which we currently don't have. And then I keep a third just to do some fun stuff. So the stuff I can never justify. Just have a bit of fun and do those exciting things that when you don't have a load of money, you can't really justify doing. So I don't know what exactly I do yet, but get a Cardiff hot air balloon. Reese Blumber always used to refer to the Blumberg blimp that he used to put up. Just something different and fun where, I can't justify wasting money on certain things, but it'd be nice to have, I guess.
And then the last one from social media is from Mark, who says, how do you see social media developing for Cardiff, such as TikTok, game highlights, behind the scenes on YouTube? I guess mentioned at this point the Uncovered little sort of mini documentary, which was really good, the first episode of that as well. What's on a sort of future plans in that space?
Yeah, so I don't know, you probably remember we did Uncovered, I thought it was 2 years ago, but it's amazing how time flies. It was probably about 4 years ago we last did it. And then obviously there's COVID and things and the resource challenges I touched on. So we've got a lad called David that came into the team about a month ago now. So Dav's helped us on a kind of part-time freelance basis over the last year. And we were able to bring him in full-time as I say, a month ago. So Dav's background, he did the Cardiff Met broadcast course, loves a camera, loves an edit, and loves to write. So nice little triple threat for us. So he, predominantly at the moment, he's just filming and pulling together video content for us. That's a massive area of growth for us. I think we're probably a bit behind the 8 ball now. So where other teams have had the luxury of having full-time videographers, certain teams in the league have got 2 full-time videographers. I even got told, I won't name the team, but a press officer was moaning that a player's basically got his own personal videographer at one of the teams. So they have the luxury of loads of content, being able to edit loads and chuck loads of stuff out for different platforms, which we haven't had. But when we get Lewis back in from his secondment and we've got a fuller complement team, like we really want to focus on that video aspect, basically. So that's not only stuff like Uncovered, which is doing pretty well for us, but I think probably the bigger area of growth for us would be TikTok, which we've probably neglected a bit. Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, all those vertical short things, basically. Just making sure we service them as best as possible with off the pitch content, kind of random content, match highlights, just everything. And it's quite challenging. I don't teach people how to suck eggs, but like every platform's got a completely different algorithm, and if you're not doing things bang on for that particular platform or posting at the right frequency for that platform, they basically bury you. So we've made an informed decision not to do stuff on YouTube in the past until we had the people in place to do it properly, which we're getting towards now. And it became that with TikTok as well. It's like, I think it's something like they say you should be posting 3-4 times a day. Well, we can't do that. So we made a decision not to for a little while, but now we really need to start ramping that up because it is such a massive area of growth. And we talk about growing audiences and ensuring there's kind of a pipeline of supports coming through. Well, that's where the younger generations are. So how do we engage them there? The younger generations love kind of heroes. So anyone with kids, they've all got Messi shirts or PSG shirts, whatever it is, and they don't support the team. They know the individual player and worship them. So it's how do we make heroes, I guess, and recognizable figures out of players, and then obviously promote that on those platforms and make players accessible, really.
There was a question from a certain Dav who did ask what new employee has made the most impact over the last 12 months. So that
I say probably someone in the F&B team, maybe one of the chefs. Definitely not Dav.
feed that back to him directly.
Yeah, Lewis will be in a sulk with me if I said Dav. So,
gents, anything more to ask before we wrap up?
I've asked Tony's question.
What was I saw something about the season ticket delivery?
It was a mental. Who was it? The Raiders. An absolutely bonkers season ticket pack, which is basically just a chest, like a pirate chest, which opened and had like holographic video, audio. So yeah, I'm more than happy to do that next year, but the season tickets will have to go up by probably 50 to 100 quid a head looking at it. So no, that's what I'd spend a third of the budget on when I say something the nice to haves that we can't justify. Yeah, that'll be one of the things, like a real cool season member pack.
We're going to app this year. Is that the plan for the season ticket, or like sort of digital?
I think there's an option. I don't think you have to. I may be wrong on that because
I think you can. You could pay a bit more for a card if you wanted to.
Yeah, we have the ability this year to go digital. And like you said, I think people could choose if they wanted it. We've certainly had cards delivered this year, and they're ready to be printed. So yeah, I think it's just an option at this stage because obviously some people don't, they like to have the card as a memento, but others don't carry anything and would want a phone. So it's given that option, and I think Ticketmaster have rolled it out properly now. So
certainly saves me multiple times stood at the ticket office when I've forgotten my card invariably. To pay the ticket.
Just have to make sure you don't have a cracked screen now. That's what I envisage being a nightmare now, but hopefully they got the technology that sorts that.
Harley, do you want to ask your annual question?
I was going to forgo that one for now because I actually wanted to ask a genuine, serious question. So obviously, CAP's becoming a little bit of a home for women's rugby in Wales, with Wales women, playing their base there, but we've also been hosting Gwalia Lightning. Have you been working with the WRU team with the marketing and trying to find a way to sort of promote both through that media?
Yeah, a little bit. Again, probably not as much as any of us would like. I know the WRU are also, they've had a hell of a year, haven't they? And their resources really stretched as well. So I think if you asked any team in Wales, they'd say they need kind of more people on the ground to do everything justice. I think the bigger thing for me, and I don't know if Dickie mentioned it, but like, how great would it be to have actual women's teams for the region? So we go up to 18s. So I think we have 16s. Obviously, there's the hubs. You have the 16s, the 18s, and then that's it for us. And it's such we should be doing it anyway in terms of equality, but B, there's massive commercial potential there. It's not something that's being tapped into at all, but it's certainly a lot of big companies, they want to, they're asking, why don't you have a women's team? So I'm sure all the Welsh clubs would love to have a women's team. It'd be great to have like a really vibrant women's game in Wales, wouldn't it? But yeah, that's probably it's beyond my remit, and I don't know how they do it. But we work together where we can. We try and help them as much as possible to sell those Wales women's games. But when you're, for example, my focus is on selling Cardiff tickets, and that's what I'm targeted on. That's what I've got to achieve. I have certain targets that I've got to achieve. So if we're trying to sell season memberships at the same time, well, that's where my focus is, and that's what my priority is. And equally, they might be playing a game, and obviously if they're playing, it means we're not, or we're abroad. So I could be in South Africa with the team, and Wales women are playing at the Arms Park. So it's quite difficult for us to do everything, if that makes sense. But no, I'm yeah, we need to do more there, and very much happy to.
Yeah. It'd be great to, like you said, that'd be ideal, wouldn't it, to have a women's team for all of the regions. But when that happens, it'd be interesting. I know there's talk about having a North Wales team at some point in the future, so we'll see if that happens instead. But yeah, I was trying to think of something clever to say, but I didn't have anything. And then I thought, oh, when are we going to take the pod on the road and actually do it at a Cardiff game post match? Dan, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, I am. I can't promise generally how coherent I am at full time most weeks.
You should do
again if I'm actually able to, if I get the pass from the wife to come back up to Wales.
Yes, quite a drive.
Equally found me in incoherent states.
No, we will definitely have to look at something around that for the coming season. The few other just pieces of house work or whatever you call it, house cleaning. I've been asked by the Supporters Club to mention that they're running a bus to Ealing in pre-season. You can have a look at their socials on their website and sort that, or they'll be at Summerfest, which is on 24th of August, which I've remembered because it's bang on my birthday. So if you see me at Summerfest, please feel free to buy me a pint. I'm sure, Mike,
what a way to celebrate your birthday.
You've set it up for that, I imagine, that specific date, I'm sure.
Yeah, it'd be great to have as many of you there as possible. It's an event where we're working very hard to try and get out there and get people to attend. We've got a huge amount going on this year. We're having to tweak some of the timings a little bit at the moment, which is why we haven't put a full schedule out. But the whole squad will be there. You'll have, don't hold me to this, but within reason, you'll have like the scrum halves running certain clinics relevant to scrum half play. You'll have some of the wings doing the speed and agility, the back row boys or whoever doing tackle jackal. So you have kind of specific players to those skill sets leading the master classes for the kids. There's all sorts of activities for kids in terms of your inflatables, kind of circus entertainers. One thing I really think will be cool this year, which I don't know if I can even say the word now. I certainly can never spell it, but a caricaturist. I can never say that word for somebody.
Caricaturist.
That's it. There you are, Carwyn. So we have one of those come in, and they'll be doing those for a small donation to the foundation, where the person will be drawing in the new kit. Obviously, we're launching the new kit. We have the fire service, the police, the Navy, RLNI, air ambulance. So lots of fun things you can stick your little kids on to have a nice photo. And, we all know kids love fire engines and things. So, yeah, loads going on. It'd be great to kind of get as many kind of supporters there, or, people who are new to rugby there, just kind of mingle with the boys and look out to the new season.
Good stuff. And Harley, do you want to wrap us up with your usual question?
Look shocked.
I've been typecast, and it's one of the listeners' questions that I always end up being lumped with asking. So, Mike, it's coming. What's your favourite biscuit?
Do you know, I don't really. This isn't like a pious thing. I don't really eat biscuits, but that's purely because the reason, if I have them in the house, I'll sit on the sofa and eat the whole pack. So I try not to do it, but I do have a relapse in that probably every month or two, and I'll get the Fox's double chocolate chip ones. The not the ones that are chocolate cookie, but it's like a normal cookie with the chips and the chocolate on top. They're incredible. They're probably more than a day's worth of your calories, and I'll just sit on the sofa and think I'll have like 2 or 3 and be going back like some sort of addict and grabbing more and more of these biscuits until they're gone. I've realized I've done a whole pack in an hour or two. So that'll be the biscuit of choice, but I try to avoid them as much as possible.
I might have time to prepare for that question, because that's the most highbrow answer.
I was going
to say they are unbelievable. If you want me to go more traditionally, it would be a chocolate digestive or chocolate mob. But yeah, those Fox's things are incredible.
If you're listening from Fox's, sorry, go on, Harley.
So, I was about to say, I'm so grateful you didn't say chocolate digestive, because it seems to be the default answer all the guests have been going for. But I'm like with you on the I eat no biscuits or all the biscuits, and there is no in between.
It's just easier not to have them in the house at all.
If you're listening from Foxes and you do want to sponsor us, we'll gladly have some free ones as well.
Wouldn't that be a great sponsor? Like Australia, like Cadbury. Brilliant. That's what we need.
Mike, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's been great to have you on. Really good insight into what you're doing, some of the workings in the background of the club there. We'll be back over the next few weeks. Got a few more guests lined up, so keep an eye on our socials for that. Until then, catch you soon.
Yep. Thanks very much,
That's
boys.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.